Adam, the White Hair Master, Season 2, Episode 61. In the last story, we are with Adam and Sarah listening to the unfinished story of Mr. Harvey, the father of a crazy young man possessed by a fairy dog. According to what he said, Mr. Harvey had killed countless dogs for meat in the past. By a ruthless method, Mr. Harvey not only took the lives of the poor dogs but also brought them an excruciating death. He did not expect to regret it for a long time because of this. It was completely dead when the white dog was pulled from the cauldron of boiling water. But its eyes were still wide open, as if still not resigned to such a sudden and painful death. When he looked into those eyes, a glimpse of Mr. Harvey could be seen in them, giving him the feeling that the figure would never fade away. Mr. Harvey doesn't care about that much. Now, he only cares about sharpening the knife in his hand to cut the dog's flesh. But before he could do this, someone came running from a distance, this person running and calling out Mr. Harvey's name as if there was something extremely urgent. The person who came was the neighbor near Mr. Harvey's house. Seeing this man's panicked expression, Mr. Harvey immediately dropped the knife in his hand and ran to the neighbor to ask what was wrong. With a gasp, Mr. Harvey's neighbor gave him the bad news. Harvey's only son, Larry, is hospitalized in the emergency room. As soon as he heard his son was in the hospital, Mr. Harvey's ears almost went off. He could no longer hear anything the neighbor said. Ignoring all his work, Mr. Harvey rushed to the street, took the first taxi he saw, and rushed to the hospital. Larry is his only son. If he is destined to be, it is confirmed that Mr. Harvey cannot live anymore. After arriving at the hospital, Mr. Harvey quickly found the room his son was in. Fortunately, the boy is now out of danger, no longer in danger of life. In front of Mr. Harvey now is the image of his son lying on a hospital bed, his eyes closed. Beside him, Harvey's wife could not hide her anxiety. She was constantly startled every time her son moved, even the slightest. Hearing the door open, Mrs. Harvey turned around. As soon as she saw her husband, she couldn't hold it anymore. 2 lines of tears kept falling without being able to say a word. Despite being highly anxious about his son, Mr. Harvey still advised his wife to calm down and tell him everything about why their son came to such an incident. Suppressing sobs, Mrs. Harvey slowly recounted what had happened to their son. That day, like every other day, their son and his friends went to the riverbank to play. This is a place that the children love very much. Everything is going very standard. No one can expect that an event is about to happen. While playing with friends, Larry's face and attitude suddenly changed. According to the children's description, Larry seemed to transform into a completely different person in a blink of an eye. Although his friends worriedly called his name, Larry couldn't hear anything. Right now, he was like a corpse without a soul. While Larry's friends didn't know what to do, suddenly Larry stood up. To the surprise of his friends, Larry did not say a word, so he quietly walked step by step to the bridge railing. Larry's movements were no longer slow and sluggish as soon as he approached the bridge. To the extreme panic of his friends, Larry quickly climbed over the bridge's railing. At this point, his friends didn't need to think to guess what would happen next. Because everything happened so suddenly and without warning, even though they were close, Larry's friends could not do anything to stop him. Amidst the soundless cries of the children, Larry threw himself into the river with the utmost determination, without hesitation. Fortunately, when the incident happened, a fisherman on the riverbank saw and ran to save Larry in time before he drowned. This person and the people around quickly took Larry to the hospital for emergency and then contacted his family. Although the critical condition has passed, Larry still shows no sign of waking up. At this point, Mrs. Harvey couldn't hold it anymore. She turned to look at her son, and 2 lines of tears continued to fall. He is also distraught, but at this moment, Mr. Harvey knows that he needs to calm down. On the one hand, he reassured his wife and, at the same time, approached to observe his son's situation. Time passed so heavily that he didn't know how much time had passed. Without warning, Larry slowly opened his eyes. The boy was awake. But before Harvey and his wife were happy, something happened. As soon as he woke up, the boy kept screaming and struggling. Thinking that your child is still terrified of what he's been through, Harvey and his wife quickly approached to reassure the boy, repeatedly calling his name to calm the boy. But all efforts of Mr. Harvey and his wife turned out to be in vain. As time went on, Larry became more and more out of control. Whenever his parents approached him, he would scream loudly and repeatedly push away as if he were furious. During that time, Larry scratched a massive line on Mr. Harvey's face. Seeing his son begin to lose control, Mr. Harvey feared that if he did not control quickly, the boy might hurt himself. He immediately rushed in to hug his son, but before Mr. Harvey had time to hug his son back, his arm was mercilessly bitten by Larry. Blood from the bite did not stop flowing, but Larry still showed no sign of letting go. Looking at the boy now was like a wild animal with prey in its mouth. Feeling that everything was not right, on the one hand, Mr. Harvey tried to control his son. On the other hand, he urged his wife to quickly find a doctor. When doctors and nurses arrived, it took 4 to 5 healthy people to control the boy. The doctor immediately injected Larry with a sedative to temporarily fall asleep. After Larry was asleep, Mr. Harvey approached the doctor to inquire about his son's condition. The doctor said that despite the boy's appearance, there were no injuries. But most likely, while falling into the river, Larry's head was hit somewhere, which caused Larry's brain damage. The doctor added that while waiting for the boy to regain consciousness, he would re-examine to find the cause. But despite the doctor's efforts, Larry's situation remained unchanged. Mr. Harvey had no choice but to take his son home to take care of him, thinking that he would return to normal after a while. But things are not that simple. Since returning from the hospital, Mr. Harvey's family has always had something happen, but it has never been peaceful. Since returning home, Larry has completely changed, no longer the gentle and obedient boy everyone used to know. Larry's condition worsened daily. His madness broke out several times daily. At times like that, he screamed loudly and smashed furniture in the house at his mother's helplessness. More and more things got worse, not only causing trouble in the house. Larry began to roam around the village to cause trouble. At first, it was just teasing this person, that person. But later on, the situation became more serious, and even Larry beat the children in the village. So, the number of people who come to Mr. Harvey's house to blame and punish is increasing more and more. Every few days, he had to apologize to one family or bring money to compensate the other family. Although he loved his son very much, Mr. Harvey gradually became tired and could no longer bear it. Feeling that gentle words to advise his son were ineffective, Mr. Harvey began using spanking to deter the boy. He warned that if Larry tried to cause further destruction, he would lock him up. Finally, with no other choice, Mr. Harvey had to clean the room in the warehouse to lock his son in it. But somehow, even though Mr. Harvey was conscientious, Larry was still able to find a way out. Mr. Harvey worked very hard to bring his son home each time. As time passed, Mr. Harvey was also gradually helpless, no longer thinking about keeping his son. As for the people in the village, they also gradually got used to Larry wandering in the village. They tried to stay away from him as much as possible. They didn't want to get in trouble with him. Mr. Harvey fell silent and bowed his head. After a while, he sadly spoke up. He admitted that perhaps because he had killed too many lives in his youth, his son was now facing such retribution. After Mr. Harvey calmed down, Adam spoke softly. He said that the matter was not much different from Mr. Harvey's thinking. Throughout the years, the spirit of the white dog he killed still clings to his son and refuses to let go. Hearing what Adam said, Mr. Harvey's whole body stiffened as if an electric current ran through. He did not expect this to be true. Initially, before entering this bloody profession, many people warned him about the consequences. Still, for the money, Mr. Harvey ignored them all. But at this point, even if he didn't want to believe it, he still had to accept it as the truth. After a few emotional seconds passed, Mr. Harvey quickly fell to his knees on the floor. He did so to beg Adam to help his son return to normal. He thought that if Adam could have known about this, he had a way to solve it, so as he knelt, Mr. Harvey kept begging Adam to help his son. Seeing Mr. Harvey like this, Adam quickly stood up and helped Mr. Harvey up. With a familiar smile, he promised to do his best. Adam started to get to the point when he waited for Mr. Harvey to regain his composure. He began to ask him about his son's travel time. From there, he could devise the best countermeasures to avoid letting the fairy dog run away. It was really annoying. After knowing what he needed to know through Mr. Harvey, Adam began to work out the plan in his head. After thinking for a while, Adam told Mr. Harvey to stay away for a while. He will prepare some things in this house to wait for Larry's return. Before this arrangement with Adam, Mr. Harvey did not hesitate at all. He immediately followed, filled with hope that his son would be saved. As soon as Mr. Harvey moved away, the gate opened. The truth is like what Mr. Harvey just told Adam. After a day of wandering, this is when Larry comes home to rest. Not knowing what measures Adam will use to deal with the fairy dog occupying Larry's body, we wait for the next episode to know the story's outcome.